episode of Faces of Love. Today we have with us another guest who has made it part of her love mission to care for those who sacrifice everything for us. We want to talk with her about how she got to this place, how this mission has changed her, and really what part of her love journey brought her to this particular love mission. So, Jennifer, would you care to introduce yourself to the folks at home?
Hi, everybody. I am Jennifer Martin, and I know Kevin through working with him previously at another company, and I am a volunteer at the USO of North Carolina.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. To give some backstory, in my professional life, I do process management and project management, and that's where I happen to work with Jen at a former company. So, Jen, let me ask you, so you say you volunteer at the USO, but that's not what you do professionally, right?
Correct. I am, professionally, I'm a project manager.
Oh, okay. Well, I can see how that could probably work out to your advantage because you've got very similar skill sets. Let me ask you, so what type of work do you do at the USO?
Mostly it's working in the center at the Raleigh-Durham International Airport, and we greet guests, we make them food. Sometimes we just hang out and talk with them. We have a computer room, so sometimes there's a little light IT skill set needed if they're having problems with the printer or getting connected to the internet. And then we also help as sometimes we have deployments that go out of the airport, or we've got kids that have just come out of basic training that are going to their next base or camp for their next schooling and training. And so we help get them situated, and if they're having any travel problems while they're at the USO, we help them with those as well. So it's really about serving our active duty military and the reservists, as well as the retired military, and then any guests that they bring in the center with them, such as their spouse or their children or their parents.
Excellent. So how long have you been working with the USO?
About a little over 10 years now.
All right.
Yeah.
So if I could ask, whether it be your work in the USO, your professional work, or anything else that you take part in, I don't know if you are religious or take part in church services, but if you were to look at the whole of what you give, how you give to the world, what would you consider to be your love mission?
I would say my love mission is just to show people that there are other people that care about them, even if it's a stranger. Most of the people that I meet at the USO, I never see again. We do have some regular travelers that come in, and I do get to know a few of those. But for the most part, I think it's just really showing that people care about other people, and we want to be there and help for in whatever capacity that we can. You know, and it's not about how well we know somebody. It's just about showing love to humankind. That's
excellent. That's excellent. So if you don't mind my asking, so I royally applaud your love mission. That's exactly the type of thing that we try to do as part of United States of Love, and I would encourage everyone to do. But I want to ask you, so how did you come to, so you mentioned the USO. I don't know if you have other outlets as well, but let's start with the USO. So how did you come to working or volunteering with the USO? Because there's a lot of different ways that you could enact that love mission. The USO, I'm guessing, had some kind of particular interest. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. I have a lot of family and friends that have served in the military at one point in time, or are still serving in the military. And it's just having that history of family and friends that have served. There's just kind of a sense of a patriotic duty, I think. And I was not eligible to serve in the military due to a pre-existing health condition. But it's just one of those things that I have never forgotten, that there are people that have willingly signed up to serve in the military. And, you know, regardless of whether they agree with their assignments in the military or not. They do their job to the best of their ability, even if that means that they're sacrificing their life. And that's just something that is awe-inspiring to me. I mean, I think it's similar when you have any type of first responder, right? The police and firefighters are the same way. And shortly after September 11th, one of my brothers had re-entered the Army, and his unit was one of the first ones deployed and to the Middle East back in 2003. And that really resonated with me. I was, in my mid-20s at that time, and seeing my brother going off to fight in this war that there were a lot of mixed opinions about sending overseas. And even in my junior and senior year of college, when we had, what was the operation, the first Gulf War?
Desert Storm or
Desert Storm, thank you. Being a junior and a senior in high school and seeing guys that had graduated just a year or two before me that had chosen to go into the military or being deployed, and then anytime there's a war conflict comes up, it always brings up that question about, are they going to reinstate the draft, and thinking about how that impacts a generation. And that's just always something that resonated with me. And I think the USO Center at the Raleigh-Durham Airport opened around 2004, and then I got involved around 2009 as a volunteer there. And it's just something that I've loved. I love the people that I meet. And I love being able to talk to the people that want to talk and the ones that don't want to talk, serving them in any way I can, even if it's just giving them their personal space.
Fair. It's funny that you mentioned 9/11. I can remember being in Philadelphia. I was in graduate school at the time. And, as I'm sure you can imagine, in the Northeast, there was a whole lot of panic at the time. I'm sure a lot of people were panicked at the time because no one knew what was happening.
Right.
But I remember the very next day, myself and quite a few people I knew were right there at the enlistment office. And all of a sudden, everyone was ready to serve. And it was amazing, the unity that was happening at that time. And unfortunately, we didn't keep that, but it was amazing because it was the first time I had ever seen it. And everyone was just on board to do whatever was needed. And it's interesting because it was a weird twist of fate that actually kept me from enlisting. The enlistment officer actually told me, I don't recommend you enlist. And I was just like, I'm getting turned down, and I was enlisting for the Navy. I was like, I'm getting turned down? He said, no, you're not being turned down. We will accept you. I'm just telling you I don't recommend it. And I said, okay. And there was a long conversation that happened thereafter, and I went, okay, I understand his reasoning. And I took his advice. I didn't enlist. But I did actually assist with a number of USO-like organizations and things that were preparing folks to enlist and go through basic as it came through, because we had the shipyards there in Philly.
Sure.
And my dad was in the Navy as well. But it's interesting seeing it from that perspective, especially when you've got people that are very close to you enlisting in times of war, and seeing that impact both when they're going in, but then also when they're coming back. Because when they're coming back, there's no parades, there's no celebration, other than a few photo ops when they get off the plane. They kind of become these forgotten people. So being able to be in that serving capacity for those who have already served for us, I think is fantastic. And you're absolutely right. I would say the same for first responders as well. I don't think they get nearly the attention that they deserve for the service that they offer either.
Agree. And, one of the great things about the USO is, we have centers across the country. We even have centers internationally where our military men and women can, as they're passing through an airport or when they're at a base, that they can, just have time for relaxation and rest while they're waiting for their flight or they're waiting for their train. But there's a lot more to the USO than just having centers available. We offer programs for people that are transitioning out of the military to help them with their resume skills, right? Because one of the things that you've got a broad range of skill sets in the military, but the military verbiage doesn't always translate to the civilian way, even though it's the same exact job. Or a similar job. So helping people transition from being in the military to now being in the civilian world. Also helping, they've got educational programs for kids that, most of the educational programs are at or on the bases, but offering those types of training as well. And then, you've got soldiers that suffer from PTSD or have other issues. And while there's a lot of programs that help them with, try to transition and cope with those issues, the USO is kind of, I would say, maybe like a mediator to help people get plugged into those types of programs as well. So it's a lot more than just being at a center. And I know some of the older generations listening to this, and when I say older generations, I'm talking about Gen X and older, will probably remember Bob Hope. And that's one of the, when somebody says, have you ever heard of the USO? And they're like, oh, Bob Hope. And there's that as well, right? So there is entertaining, and that still happens today as well. And in fact, we've got a lot of celebrities that are, musicians or actors that still do go overseas and, go to the Middle East and go to some of these not very secure areas to be with our troops and just show them gratitude and thanks and give them, an hour or two of entertainment to help them take their minds off of what else, what they're there to serve for.
Excellent. So you mentioned that you have a lot of people that have served in your family. So would you consider that, at least for your particular family, more of a tradition of service in that regard?
No, I would definitely not call it a tradition. It's kind of a mixed bag. I had a grandfather that served in World War II. He was an MP in Germany. And I have a cousin that was in the Navy, and he was a in-flight mechanic. And then I have one stepbrother who served in the Army, and I have another stepbrother who was special ops in the Air Force. And then I've got a myriad of other, distant relatives, uncles, or, first and second cousins that have also served, and then, friends from high school and work that have also served.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I had to think through that, because I know there are some families where it's just, that's what you do. You reach 18, you're going to serve in some regard, even if it's National Guard. And that, God bless them for that level of dedication to it. But, to any individual that chooses to serve, that has to be a personal choice above and beyond any tradition. So, just like the service that you do with the USO, I'm pretty sure no one forced you to it. This was a choice that you made to be in that loving role, to be in that caring role for people you've never met, and from what you've said, may never meet again.
Right.
So help me to understand what brought you into that caring, supportive role. So you mentioned that, due to pre-existing medical conditions, you weren't able to enlist. But in terms of the USO aspect of supporting and caring and some of that translation community services, was there something about your growing up or something about your personal experience of childhood that lent you toward that supportive and caring capacity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was raised by a single mom, and all of my siblings are step siblings. So realistically, from a biological standpoint, between both of my parents, I'm an only child, and so I was raised by a single mom. And we did not live too far from my grandparents, who had a farm about an hour away from where we lived. And at the farm, my grandfather's sister also lived with my grandparents, and she had been in a wheelchair since she was about 12 years old. She had contracted rheumatoid arthritis back in the 20s, and back then there was nothing to be done for it. And so she literally had been crippled from the time she was 12 until she passed away in the early 90s. And as my grandparents got older, obviously, just taking care of themselves, and and then my aunt, I don't want to say it was a burden, because that would not be the right thing to say, but it just gets harder as you get older to take care of a house and to take care of the farm and everybody else. And so my mother and I, a lot of times, almost every other weekend at least, would go up to the farm and serve my grandparents, cleaning the house, or taking care of my aunt so that my grandmother could have some downtime. And and I was really close with my grandparents. I spent my summers up there with them. So I loved being around them, and I loved being able to help them and serve them and spend time with them. And I think just my mother really, without ever specifically saying, we're serving people, she just instilled that sense of caring and that caretaker mentality into me from a very young age. And my mother's very much a caretaker herself. And you had mentioned earlier about not knowing if I went to church. So I do go to church, and years ago we took a spiritual gifts assessment. And one of the things that came up was, I can't remember it, I don't think it was specifically caretaker, but it was servant, right? Somebody who's kind of behind the scenes and helping to take care of people or situations to get, goals achieved. And so I think that just got instilled in me from a very young age, with helping take care of family members. And then as my grandparents got older, we moved them here, and they lived with us for a while. And, so I helped take care of them in that capacity as well. And it's just something that's always resonated with me. And, like I said, whether it's somebody I know or whether it's a stranger, the compassion and the kindness that you can show. There's a Bible verse, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it talks about, you never know when you're helping a stranger, you never know when you're really entertaining angels, and you just never know. And it just, even when it's hard, even when it's a hard situation, by the time I come out to the other end of that opportunity, I'm always glad that I was there, because I'm happy when I can help somebody, but I'm also happy for the things that people teach me and help me to become a better person. So I think it's twofold.
Wonderful. It's fun. So you were mentioning that verse, and I can't pinpoint that one, but it made me think of another one of, when I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. And I say, when, Lord, when did we do this for you? He said, when you did for the least of these, you did for me.
Yep.
And I think that's a fantastic kind of mindset and mentality for people to take on. And I wish more parents, single or otherwise, would instill this in their children. I know I'm trying to do that with mine now. So let me ask this, and it's somewhat shifting topic, but I think it's related to what you were talking about. So you mentioned in your spiritual gifts assessment that you had servants come up, someone who serves, someone who helps facilitate. Having worked with you, I know I've seen this personally, but can you talk a bit about how that plays into, or how that pertains to your professional career?
Yeah, it's, I think it's just about wanting to be a team player, wanting to get the job done, wanting to do the job to the best of my ability, and wanting to see my coworkers be able to, well, not only my coworkers, but the company that I work for and our customers, whether it's internal customers or external customers, being able to see them achieve the goals that they have and be able to complete their tasks and their jobs to the best of their ability as well. And anything that I can do to help in that capacity, you know, whether it's me getting an assignment completed on time, or, you know, having spare time and coming along somebody and going, hey, I've got a few extra hours today. You know, I know you're bombarded. What can I help you do? So I think that's just going back to serving others, and you can do it in any capacity, professional, personal.
Agreed. It reminded me of a mentor of mine whom we both worked with, used to often say to me, to lead is to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever forget that, you're no longer leading. So if you come into any endeavor with the mindset of a teammate, with the mindset of a servant, with the mindset of I'm here to help facilitate X. I'm not just here for my own benefit. That leadership becomes a part of that, because it's in that serving that gives you the capacity, or in some cases the authority, to lead. By no other means do you get that, because a title alone doesn't make somebody follow you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let me ask this, with regard to serving, and you mentioned this a little earlier, with young men and women who are going into the armed services, and whether or not they like their orders, whether or not they like the command that they're given, whether or not they like where they're being sent, whether or not they like their particular role at a given point, they continue to serve. They do their job. They do what's asked of them because it's what they volunteered for first. It's
Right.
how they serve, and it's a part of their role in the organization. So they're not necessarily at the top. They could be down here in some role that isn't fully utilizing them, but is absolutely important to get the job done. That, I think tends to happen a lot more in military style organizations than in civilians, because we don't necessarily have that same mentality in many cases. Can you tell me a bit about how you've seen that style of do your job, serve anyway, help get the job done, be the servant that we need rather than the servant you want to be mentality? And what do you think we can do to cultivate that in others?
That's a really good question. You know, I think if everybody could find a way to serve in some capacity, I think it was Bill Clinton back in the 90s, early 90s, had made a suggestion that he wanted to try to implement, where everybody, once you graduated high school, you had a year or two of serving in some capacity. I know other countries do it, right? Israel, it's mandatory to serve in their military. And I know he had mentioned, you know, whether you serve in the military or you serve in the Peace Corps or you find some other volunteer opportunity that you do for a year where you're giving back to the community. And, you know, that was something that at the time, you know, I was still in high school and probably didn't 100% agree with it then, and thought, you know, I don't want to be forced to serve. But as you grow older and you grow a little bit wiser, at least, right? You see the impacts that people and events have on your life. You really begin to understand that. So I think if we could get people to serve in any capacity, for a period of time, and it doesn't have to be like taking a year off of work or a year off of school to join the Peace Corps, but, you know, regular volunteer opportunities, and also having a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things that I've struggled with in the past is when I'm asked to do stuff at work that I don't necessarily agree with or don't understand why I'm being asked to do something, and I question it, and maybe it's information that can't be shared with me because it's proprietary or it's a non-disclosure agreement. And then, that happened quite a bit when I was a business analyst. And, now as a project manager, I have a little bit more access to some of the behind the scenes and why we're doing things the way we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a mentor that maybe they can't share everything with you, or maybe they're not even at the same company or the same service organization that you are, but having somebody that's got the experience that can come alongside you and you say, hey, I was asked to do something today that I didn't agree with, and but they told me it was part of my job and I just had to do it, and
Mm-hmm.
person doesn't have a military background. Maybe the mentor does, or maybe the mentor has the experience that goes, well, sometimes you're asked to do things and you don't always understand why, but there is reason, and you just have to trust that the person that's asking you to do this there's a plan, right? There's a greater plan that you're a part of, and you just can't see the whole big picture.
It's it's very interesting that you chose those words, because I was thinking something similar, but I can understand why, to some degree, people aren't as agreeable to the greater plan concept, because by and large we're not seeing people as into religions as they have been. So this concept of a trust and in a greater plan and a benevolent leader with that greater plan, I can understand why people might not be as open to that explanation. But you're absolutely right that it does happen, and not all levels are going to have all levels of context, and
Right.
it does take an amount of trust that there is a greater plan in place. There is a reason things are being done this way, and it's not that questioning shouldn't be avoided. There are certainly times where questioning is absolutely crucial, but there are also times where that question can't be answered.
Agreed.
And it takes that level of belief in the cause, trust in the leadership, belief in who you're serving or why you're serving or what the need is, to kind of bridge those gaps, because you're not always going to have a full context as to why you're being called to serve in the way that you're serving.
Right.
But I remember what you were talking about during the Clinton administration. I believe he was calling it the Service Corps at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking it was a good idea. I just had no clue as to how he was going to make something like that work. But to your example of Israel and the military, there is something about a common experience creating a unifying factor, kind of like 9/11 did.
Yep.
For us, and probably now the coronavirus. So I want to ask this, and I, to some degree, I think we've answered it, but I want to get this out of your words rather than my interpretation. So when the day comes that you're no longer able to serve, however that means, what would you want your impact in the world to have been? However small, however large. What would you want somebody to remember Jennifer Martin and how she changed the world?
Wow, that's a tough question. Yeah, I think if people just remembered me as kind, maybe happy, and willing to come alongside a stranger, even if it's just a small conversation, how I'm going to be remembered. I don't know. That's a really tough question, Kevin. If somebody can remember me and it brings a smile to their face, I think that's an impact. If somebody can think of me and it makes them smile.
Well, I could say, having known you a while, it'd be pretty hard for them to remember you and not bring a smile to their face.
Thank you. That's sweet.
Thank you for all that you do and continue to do for our troops, in your professional capacity for your customers, as well as other capacities. Thank you for giving to the world and providing an example that hopefully others that come behind you will be able to learn from and take and branch off in their own regards. So for those at home, thank you also for being a part of this. This is one of many in our Faces of Love series. We hope to meet, talk with, and get to learn more about others and how their love journeys transformed into the love mission that they embody today. And until we get to meet again, have a great day. Stay blessed.